One of Tyler's oldest churches, Marvin Methodist, has been part of the downtown Tyler skyline since 1890, and crews are currently working to restore its signature steeple. KLTV7's J.D. Conti takes us up for this story.
Hundreds of feet above the brick streets of downtown Tyler, crews are working to preserve the 130-year-old steeple of the Marvin Methodist Church. 2 years ago, a storm knocked some of the shingles off, with church leaders saying the age of the church also calling for repairs. Giles is an associate pastor at Marvin. He says church officials were doing a routine check when they realized how old the architecture was.
They found that supporting the superstructure of the steeple were 4 by 8 beams. Amazingly.
But that's not the only thing they found. The names of workers who have been working on the building over the centuries. Summer Boyd and her husband John own Boyd Contractors, who specialize in roofing restoration work. They added their name too.
They added something to the steeple if they did something different up there. The other contractors that have worked up there left their initials or their names with the date. So that was pretty cool to find.
And with those names, memories of past construction workers, an old Pepsi can, shingles from past projects, and this copy of the Tyler Courier-Times from 1987. Marvin Methodist was named a Texas Historical Landmark in 1968. A big part of this project, bringing the church into the 21st century while maintaining its historical structure and appearance.
We're able to, bring that efficiency to the church while also using materials that are historically accurate. So it's kind of the melding of two, bringing in modern while keeping everything looking the same.
J.D. Conti, KLTV 7 News.
And a portion of Bodark Avenue in front of the church is closed during construction. They're hoping all the work will be complete in time for the church's 175th anniversary on November 12th.